The silence didn't break with a statement. It shattered with paperwork. Because when Buckingham Palace finally moved on Archie and Lilibet, it didn't whisper, didn't explain, didn't defend itself. It reached for the one weapon that never misses: cold, permanent constitutional documents. And in a single stroke, years of mystery collapsed into something far more terrifying than rumor: finality. For years, people asked the same questions in hushed tones. Why were Meghan and Harry's children never presented like the others? Why no balcony moments, no church photos, no royal christening spectacle? Why did the palace act like time would solve a problem it refused to name? Now we know why. Because this was never about family drama. This was about protocol, and protocol does not forgive. The crown waited, patient, silent, watching the narrative grow louder, bolder, more confident. Interviews, docuseries, memoirs. A carefully polished rebel story sold to the world. But while cameras rolled, something else was happening behind palace walls. Files were being checked, records reviewed, boxes ticked or not ticked. And when the review ended, the conclusion was brutal. According to palace insiders, documents have already been prepared. Not warnings, not provisional notes. Final orders. Papers that don't get undone by interviews or public sympathy. Papers that permanently alter how history itself will record Archie and Lilibet. The message inside them is devastatingly simple. Their claim to royal identity is over. To understand why the crown went nuclear, you have to rewind more than a century. Back to 1917, when King George V locked the monarchy into survival mode. Europe was burning. Royal bloodlines were under threat. Confusion was dangerous. So the king issued the letters patent. Dry, precise, unemotional law that defined who could be royal and who could not. 3 requirements, no flexibility. First, legitimate royal bloodline. Second, birth formally recognized and recorded by the crown. Third, formal connection to the Church of England. No shortcuts, no modern reinterpretation, no celebrity exceptions. For generations, these rules worked quietly in the background, ensuring royal titles weren't handed out like souvenirs. And for generations, no one challenged them until Meghan and Harry. Because when palace officials reviewed Archie and Lilibet's status, they didn't see certainty. They saw cracks, gaps in documentation, questions surrounding birth records, unclear timelines, church ties that raised eyebrows rather than settled nerves. And here's the uncomfortable truth: the clock started ticking the moment those children were born. The palace didn't react immediately because it never does. It waits, it observes, it allows people to talk themselves into corners. And when the moment is right, it acts without emotion. But the paperwork wasn't the only thing that triggered alarm bells. Behind the scenes, a second storyline was forming, one Meghan never expected to surface. According to multiple sources close to the situation, the woman who allegedly carried Lilibet, the surrogate no one was supposed to know about, is preparing to speak. And what pushed her toward the edge wasn't fame or revenge. It was money. Insiders claim the final payment was never made. That compensation was allegedly buried through creative accounting, possibly disguised as donations or foundation expenses in California. The goal? Keep Meghan's name clean. Keep the illusion intact. No paper trail connecting her to surrogacy. But the woman didn't disappear the way she was supposed to. She allegedly kept records, messages, transfers, calls, including one chilling warning from someone inside Meghan's legal circle urging her to let it go. She did, for years, until now, because when payments stop, silence ends. And if her claims are true, the implications are explosive, not just legally, but biologically. Sources allege the surrogate believes Prince Harry may not be the biological father of Lilibet. That single question alone explains years of palace hesitation. But it doesn't stop there. Harry's own words began to betray the story. In Spare, he described Meghan receiving 2 epidurals, then leaving the hospital and arriving at Frogmore Cottage within roughly 2 hours. On paper, it sounds miraculous. In reality, it collapses under basic medical logic. The drive alone from Portland Hospital to Frogmore can take nearly an hour. That leaves an impossible window for labor, delivery, recovery, observation, discharge, and 2 epidurals. Any woman who's had one knows you don't walk out afterward. You wait, your vitals stabilize, blood pressure normalizes, mobility returns. That takes time. And if Meghan truly experienced high blood pressure or early signs of preeclampsia, as has been suggested, she wouldn't have been discharged at all. Doctors reviewing the timeline privately described it as fantasy. Then there's the age factor. Meghan's pregnancy fell into the geriatric category, a clinical risk classification that demands tighter monitoring, fewer variables, and strict protocols. No spa lighting, no candles, no birthing balls. Hospital insiders insist the Portland does not offer wellness retreat-style birth births for high-risk mothers. If preeclampsia was present, treatment would involve magnesium sulfate, constant monitoring, and extended hospitalization, not a 2-hour turnaround. That's when the narrative stopped being about birth and started being about management. While Meghan and Harry built an image as royal rebels, the palace quietly dismantled the foundation underneath them, because rebellion only works if the crown still acknowledges you. And now, it doesn't. The monarchy didn't scream. It didn't defend itself. It simply erased. Archie and Lilibet are not rebels. They are not exiles. They are not victims of palace cruelty. They are absent. Absent from official records. Absent from succession reality. Absent from a history book that doesn't explain, it just records. And that silence will echo longer than any documentary ever could. The most brutal move the monarchy can make is not punishment. It's erasure. No press conference. No courtroom spectacle. No dramatic confrontation. Just absence. Because when the crown removes you from the record, it doesn't argue with you, it outlives you. This is the part Meghan and Harry never planned for. They believed control meant volume, more interviews, more documentaries, more personal truth repeated until it became accepted reality. But the palace never competes in the noise. It waits for the noise to exhaust itself, then responds with silence so heavy it crushes everything underneath. And now that silence has a name: official royal history. Sources close to the palace say this wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about containment. Because once questions around legitimacy, documentation, and lineage reached a certain threshold, the crown had only two choices: clarify publicly or quietly close the door forever. It chose the door. That's why no explanation followed. No clarification about paperwork, no rebuttal of rumors. The monarchy didn't need to convince the public. It only needed to satisfy its own rulebook. And once that rulebook said no, the conversation ended. This is where the Sussex brand collapses under its own weight. For years, Meghan and Harry sold the idea of being royal outsiders. Still royal, just freer. Still connected, just rebellious. Still relevant because the crown was still reacting to them. But when the crown stops reacting, the rebellion loses oxygen. You can't be a rebel if there's nothing left to rebel against. Behind closed doors, insiders say palace officials referred to this as closure, not revenge, not retaliation. Closure, the final administrative step in a long process of disengagement. And here's what makes it devastating: there is no appeal. These aren't decisions made by popularity. They're made by precedent, by documents older than modern media, by systems designed to survive scandals, divorces, abdications, and even wars. And once those systems move, they do not reverse. For Meghan, this strikes at the core of everything she built, because her global identity, her deals, her influence, all of it leaned on proximity to royalty. Not the work, not the titles alone, the association. But what happens when the association disappears? Hollywood insiders are already whispering, quietly, carefully, because brands don't invest in fading myths, they invest in enduring symbols. And once the palace stops acknowledging you, you're no longer a symbol, you're a story that already peaked. Harry feels this differently. Sources say he's struggling with something far more personal than brand collapse. He didn't just lose titles, he lost belonging. The institution he was born into has effectively said, "We will continue without you." No fight, no reconciliation arc, no dramatic return, just continuation. And the hardest truth for him to face is this: the monarchy doesn't need him anymore. Not as a spare, not as a rebel, not even as a problem. It moved on. That's why this decision didn't come with a fight. The palace didn't challenge the Sussexes publicly because it didn't have to. It simply ensured the next generation wouldn't carry unresolved questions into the future. Archie and Lilibet will grow up loved by their parents, surrounded by California sunshine, celebrity neighbors, and a life far removed from royal corridors. But when history books are written, when official records are archived, when genealogies are updated, their names will not appear as heirs. And that absence will never be explained, because the crown doesn't explain itself. It records. What makes this moment historic is not cruelty. It's cold consistency. The same system that protected the monarchy for centuries applied the same rules again, without fear of backlash, hashtags, or headlines. The message wasn't aimed at Meghan and Harry alone. It was aimed at everyone watching. Fame does not rewrite protocol. Media pressure does not override lineage. Personal narrative does not replace documentation. And no matter how loud you speak, the crown will always have the last word, written, filed, and sealed. For Meghan, the realization is brutal. Control slipped away not because she lost the spotlight, but because the spotlight stopped mattering. The palace didn't respond to her version of events. events because it didn't need to. Its version is already archived. For Harry, the pain cuts deeper. He didn't just walk away from the monarchy. The monarchy finished the walk without him. This isn't exile. This isn't punishment. This is final positioning. The Sussex story will continue in interviews, projects, and platforms, but royal history, real royal history, has already turned the page. And once the crown turns a page, it never looks back. That's the lesson here. Not about children, not about titles, not even about rebellion. It's about power that doesn't need to announce itself. The monarchy didn't raise its voice. It didn't defend its honor. It didn't chase public opinion. It simply removed two names from the future. And in doing so, reminded the world of something it never forgot. The crown doesn't bend. It doesn't explain. And it doesn't lose. And it doesn't lose. And it doesn't lose.